There we go. Thank you. Okay, so that was just an overview of what we're going to do today and an overview of what the assignment looks like. One more thing I want to show you before we move on, and I'm going to share my screen again, is an example I have of the transcript from a student from last year or year before last. So you can see what it looks like. Here's a counselor, here's a client counselor, that's what this person decided to use. This is what they said, and these are the skills they listed. My comments are in colored type so that you can pick it out. And you can see, and this is also on the Moodle page under the assignments. You can see that not every section is going to have some skills used. And this is her commentary on what she wanted to do, what she was trying to do. Like here, you know, she said, I should have done this instead of that. I'm like, that would have been an option. This was a really sophisticated way of switching the conversation from deficit-based to strengths-based. And I'm just going to make sometimes casual conversations. They're just observations. That was a good option. Let's the client do this or that. Some folks don't always recognize all the skills they're using. So I said this is also an example of empowerment. I indicated this is a closed-ended question. I would call this case management or psychoed. So, you know, just more comments about what you're doing in this. And then your 3 to 4 page reflection paper should follow here. So just stop using this box and then add your reflection paper at the end. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. So then you're just going to upload one document to to Moodle when you're done. So this assignment, I've given you a week to do the assignment. I need to check on Moodle to see when I said it was due. I think next Sunday night.
We have it for Friday, I think.
Did I say Friday? I think it's
on there Friday.
Yeah, I needed the weekend to grade it. If you need more time than next Friday, just let me know. I can easily go to next Sunday, but it's going to push out how much time it takes me to get it back to you. Yeah, I did say Friday because I needed to be able to read it over the weekend. So do your best to get it in by Friday. If you can't do that, just send me an email and let me know when you would like to turn it in. I'm pretty flexible with that. Just recognizing that if you turn it in after Friday, that it may take me longer to get it back to you than a week. Because I tend to read papers in the order that they're sent to me.
I had a question. I know you stated earlier you said that it was going to be like a 2 to 3 page reflection, but then when you just did the examples at 3 to 4, is 3 to 4 more accurate, or is that you counting in the cover sheet? Sorry.
Let me read what I wrote. Let me read what I wrote in the assignment instructions. Okay.
Thank you.
That's what's going to be the thing. I change my assignment slightly every year.
I think she meant it was 3 to 4 of the interview pages, and then the 2 to 3 pages of reflection.
Yeah, in the instructions, it's a 2 to 3 page reflection. And the interview, it's best to have like hit for 4 pages. No more than 5, no less than 3. And just to be clear, it's due on Friday. You're not going to lose points if you turn it in later, but just let me know if you need to turn it in later.
Dr. Leva, this is Amy.
Mm-hmm.
The 2-3 page reflection, did you want us to do a title page with that too, or no?
I'm sorry, you're dropping out a little bit. Could you say that again?
The title page, did you want us to do a title page for the reflection paper too, so you know it's like we're going into the reflection?
No, that's not necessary. Just one title page for the whole assignment at the very beginning. So what I wanted to do next was to go through the PowerPoint that I emailed you a link to. I didn't email a link to, I just posted it on Moodle this morning. I was trying to organize myself about how I wanted to talk about it today. And I decided that it would make a good PowerPoint for everybody to have the information. So I'm going to screen share again and go through this PowerPoint, and then we'll ask questions about the assignment, and then we'll go into the practices in the breakout rooms. Okay, so these are just the skills for the midterm. And let me get my slideshow going. So can everybody see this?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. So skills for the midterm. So using open-ended questions, we've talked about this a bit in class. Open-ended questions are those questions that have to be answered with detail. They cannot be answered with a yes or no. So they tend to start with who, what, when, where, and how. If they start with do you or can you, that's a closed-ended question. Because can you shut the door? The answer is yes or no. Do you have sneakers? The answer is yes or no. So if you tend to start, and we all have these casual speech patterns, but if you tend to start your questions with can you or do you, back up and say, what can you, or where do you, or how can you, or what do you? Try to put the who, what, when, where, how at the beginning of the sentence. By the way, you guys had some really good conversations in your discussion board about these kinds of questions. So I think that was very helpful. The purpose of asking open-ended questions is to get more detail. You need more detail for a number of reasons. One is to make sure that you're using the client's language, that you're tracking what the client is saying, that you have enough information for goal setting, which we're going to focus on in the second half of this course, and that you really understand what the consumer wants. And a lot of consumers and clients are accustomed to giving yes, no answers because a lot of agency-based questions, like assessment questions, tend to be focused as closed-ended questions. So they're used to kind of check off questions rather than giving detailed questions. So it might take the person you're interviewing, either in this role play or in real life, some time to get accustomed to being asked open-ended questions. So you use it to get the client's language, which then you'll reuse. It also is a way to slow down an interview. So the way I think of using open-ended questions and summarizing, because summarizing slows down the interview, getting the consumer to talk in more detail is going to slow down the interview. So the person's not going to fly through the 10 questions you have in 5 minutes. It gives you time to slow down the interview and get more detail from them about what they want. And it also lets the client know you're paying attention to what's important to them, which is strengths-based and client-centered. So you use their language to ask those follow-up questions using who, what, when, where, and how. So it hits on all these different skills when you use open-ended questions. Using the service seeker's language, you get by asking open-ended questions, and it is strengths-based and client-centered. And it really helps focus the interview on what's important to the client. And it enables you to ask detailed follow-up or clarifying questions. It also helps you track what the person's saying. So you're staying with a topic rather than jumping from topic to topic to topic. Paraphrasing and summarizing. Sometimes if they're a little confusing, this last week you worked on paraphrasing. So I've underlined the differences between the two. We'll look at summarizing next. But paraphrasing is using your own words to recap what the client or consumer just said. Again, it keeps the interview focused on what's important to the client, but you can use it to speed up an interview. So when you are coming to like a transition part of an interview where you need to move on to something else, use paraphrasing. So if the person has talked in detail about the housing needs they have, their special needs child, and their problems with transportation, in paraphrasing, you would not necessarily use their own words. You would say, so far we've talked about your needs for housing, schooling issues regarding your daughter, and your need for transportation. Is that accurate? So this kind of closes up part of an interview so that you can move on to another part of an interview. It also makes sure that you're doing what the consumer thinks is important to do. So it's a double check to make sure you've heard and understood what they're really requesting. Summarizing, the difference here is you use the client's words and you use to slow down an interview. So keeps you focused on what's important to the client and consumer, slows down the interview really to get more detail. So I also use it for formulating my follow-up questions and to check in to make sure I've understood. So I put down an example here of somebody that I talked to on Friday, who was kind of all over the place, and I didn't really know what they wanted. So this is what I said to them. I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're requesting. A few minutes ago, you asked a referral to the housing guy so you can get one of the free hotel rooms. In quotes are the actual client's words here. But now you stated that you don't want to be cooped up with a bunch of crazy people in the city hotel. Which one of these is more important to you? Or which one of these would you like me to work on? So that's using the client's words. I'm summarizing, using the client's language, asking an open-ended question, and a strengths-based focus on the client's and consumer's goal. So that's how you use multiple skills in just one sentence. The next is use of self. And this is in the Miley text in the personal values and resources section. It also addressed across most of the readings in the Morgaine text. Using yourself, everybody's different. No two people are going to have the same interview with a consumer or a client. Everybody's going to have a slightly different interview with that person because we're going to ask different questions. We're going to focus on slightly different things that the consumer brings out. And use of self is the sum of all of who you are and the skills you have. So it's your self-awareness, what you know about yourself and about your biases and how you're feeling in the moment and how you respond to people that the client reminds you of. So it's all that self-awareness. Plus your social location. Consumers and clients relate differently to each other based on age, gender, ethnicity, language, all kinds of different factors. Your skill set, the skills that you have, your access to power within your position based on your social location, within your position based on your relationship to your agency and your supervisor, and your personal practice style, which is just how you do what you do. So this is what makes you unique from other social workers. And this is how social workers can be trained in the same program and do things almost identically, but a client will relate better to one social worker than another one, which is fine. That's just a personal preference. And in social work, you try to give folks the opportunity to work with somebody they relate to best. So use of self determines how you're able to engage a particular client or a particular consumer group. And it's going to be different for each one of us. So you have to notice that because this can affect a client engagement. And in many places, when a client doesn't engage with services, many agencies tend to blame the client and say, well, the client's not engaging, or the client's got an attitude. But we also have to look at us and say, well, am I engaging the client? What about me is useful to the client or not useful to the client? So that's what we're talking about when we talk about use of self. So client engagement is that ongoing dynamic and interactive process with clients and consumer groups and on behalf of diverse people, families, organizations, and community. So it's really the sum of the use of self and your relationship building skills that you use to assist people in being able to talk about and achieve their personal goals. So that's a big thing, but we're just scratching the surface of it this semester. We'll talk all through your 2 years in the program about client engagement. So right now, I just want to see if you recognize when you're using use of self and your relationships building skills to try to engage the consumer in services. We just have a couple more now. Increasing cultural awareness. This is in Miley text chapter 3 and all of the Morgaine text. This is not cultural competency. I personally don't believe in cultural competency because I can't possibly be competent in a culture that I didn't grow up in or that I've not been a longtime member of. My spouse is culturally very different from me. I know a whole lot about her culture. I'm a really engaged member of my extended family with my in-laws, but I wouldn't call myself culturally competent in that culture. So instead of cultural competence, we talk about cultural awareness. In social work, cultural sensitivity and cultural humility. Those are 3 slightly different things. In this course at this point, I just want you to reach some cultural awareness. So this is really about gaining self-awareness about your own personal biases and values so that you know what they are and that you know when they differ from the people you're working with and you take that into consideration with your use of self. If I'm working with somebody who's very culturally different from me, I'm going to start asking questions about that culture because I won't know anything about it. And I won't make assumptions even if it's close to a culture that I'm a member of or I interact with a lot. So it's being aware that people's culture is going to be different from mine, and that you're going to ask questions to make sure you have enough cultural information to help tailor resources for that person. This includes being inquisitive and open about the client and consumer's context, including language, culture. And culture is cultural practices, how people do family, religion, music, food, language, relationship patterns, all that kind of stuff is culture. At this point in the program, you should be developing dialogue and interviewing skills that place the consumer's construction of reality at the center of the conversation. And you do this through open-ended questions and using the client's language. So whatever's culturally relevant for the client needs to be the center of your conversation with the client and developing services. And cultural awareness also includes specifically rejecting the idea that different practices different from you are deficient or abnormal simply because they're different. Now, this does have to be balanced with legal mandates for safety and child welfare and adult welfare and suicidality, et cetera. But this is really a rejection of the idea that there is one prominent cultural paradigm that everybody should be adhering to. So again, this is another one that you're going to build over time, and I want to see you start scratching that particular skill. You're already doing a lot of focusing on strengths through all of these other skills that you've been doing. A strengths perspective is one in which you maintain the view that clients and consumers have potential and hopes and dreams versus viewing them from a deficit or pathology-based perspective. So people have potential, people have opportunity. Our job as social workers is to help them increase their capacity and opportunity. How you focus on strengths is to use your interviewing skills to help people construct that more positive future based on their own goals. You're also, as a social worker, strengths-based social worker, reliant on cultivating client strengths and resources at all levels of intervention, including helping people build their own empowerment from their own perspective and their own cultural context and social location. So it's really you're kind of on the side of the person, helping them build skills and walking on with them on their journey rather than telling them what they should be doing. And then I think we're almost at the end, using client-centered goals. And again, we've already talked about this. This places values on client-consumer goals over worker or agency goals. And again, this is balanced with legal mandates for safety. The way you focus on client goals is using your interviewing skills, open-ended questions, client's language, summarizing and paraphrasing, use of self and engagement to determine what the client wants to obtain from you or achieve from interacting with you. So again, it's focused on what they want. And then requires cultural sensitivity, obviously, and awareness of worker agency biases and awareness of power differentials in the worker-client relationship. So you may be working for Child Protective Services and you've got a court-mandated care plan. Even within that care plan, which might say parent needs to attend substance abuse counseling for 3 months, or they need to go to parenting classes, even within that court-mandated goal, how the consumer goes about doing that is still up to them for the most part, and how they engage that service is still up to them. So your job as a social worker is to help them identify what are their goals going to be in the context of that care plan, even if the care plan is very restrictive. So there's still lots of opportunity for client-centered goals. So I'm going to stop sharing and ask what questions folks have about that list of goals.
Sorry, can you repeat that one more time? I was doing the note.
That's all right. What questions do you have or comments do you have about those goals, or do they sound familiar to you?
Yeah, I felt like with kind of talking about the use of self, and also kind of with connecting, like building that relationship with a client, I kind of felt like that was multiple things kind of popped up, like examples. Like I know with my job there, I have a specific caseload that I'm their case manager, so I work with them, every week, every other week. And a few months ago, there was a situation where I had somebody cover for me, and this was the first time she's ever covered for me for this specific client. And this client's a little bit more an interesting case. And for that reason, like I said, that they just did not gel well, and there was an altercation incident. So it was interesting to see kind of how, like, you know, that case manager's way of, you know, case managing and, you know, social work was just not beneficial and did not gel well with that specific client. And also I've noticed, like, I case manage differently with, you know, that specific client compared to the other 10 that I have. So I think it's also good to know that you can't necessarily case manage everybody exactly the same either.
Right, you try to keep your case management skills equitable to everybody, but it's not going to be the same for everybody. And also, you know, a lot of agencies don't have the capacity to do this, but honestly, if I remind a client of an abusive parent, I shouldn't be their social worker, even if it's just how I look or the way I talk. That doesn't have anything to do with me. I want to be able to transfer them and swap them with another social worker, and that's not always doable in every agency. I'm fortunate right now working in a small mental health clinic where there's only 5 clinicians, and we have the capacity to do that. And our clients do shop for whichever social worker they want. And we think that's fine because we want somebody to have a really good fit. And people will leave and then they'll come back, and you know, it just works better for more consumers that way. And I know not every organization can do that, because sometimes there's only one of you in the agency, and you've got that role. But hopefully you can help have a conversation with the consumer about, if it's not working, what can I do to make this work better for you? And try to come to some conclusion about what's going to help that consumer. That also doesn't mean that we don't get frustrated sometimes when consumers remind us of somebody that's challenging, or when we're overworked or very frustrated. I also see it are times when we have challenges, and that can be a conversation with your supervisor.
For myself, I kind of had a question regarding I think the cultural awareness. I feel like this can be like a complicated or sensitive, you know, I guess it's just different because everyone perceives it different. You said, like, if we're not aware of the culture to ask questions, but I'm just like, you know what I mean? Like, that sounds like too direct almost, you know, and it can be, you know.
Which is a cultural issue, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes
exactly.
you can't ask those direct questions. And sometimes the language that you're speaking in the interview doesn't even have the right words to ask some of those questions.
Exactly.
I taught a lot in Washington, D.C., and had a lot of Korean students who were going to go back to Korea to do counseling. And I asked them, how would you ask this question in an interview? And they all kind of looked at me funny. And I said, what's going on? And they said, that language doesn't exist in Korean culture. We wouldn't even ask it that way. And so that helped me learn more about it. So yeah, you've got to figure out, I don't know the right word to use, but I would ask the least direct question sometimes to start getting at what I need to get at. And sometimes the questions like, what else can I help you with? Or what else can we do together? Or is this going to work for you? Or however that works in the language and the culture that you're asking that question in is sometimes a way to enter it. Or if I notice something I don't understand, I might say, I noticed that X, Y, or Z. Or I might say, is it okay for you to do X, Y, and Z in your culture? Sometimes I'll ask, is this a cultural issue or is this a family issue? Is this how your family does this? That's been a useful question for me over the years. But you're absolutely right, Stephanie. You got to be careful with the cultural questions and not be too direct.
Yeah, it sounds kind of I'm intimidated because I know that's going to happen, and you don't want to, you know, make anyone feel uncomfortable. You know, it's a sensitive issue, so you have to be very careful and mindful about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the skills I expect you to know how to do are open-ended questions, summarizing the stuff that we've practiced in class. Some of these other skills, like the bigger ones around use of self and client engagement and cultural awareness, I want you to start scratching on it and demonstrate what you can do or what you might have done differently in your interview. So I'm looking at the amount of time we have left in class. We have about an hour left. I'm going to break you into dyads. So I'm going to have you in groups of 2. And we have 3 scenarios to use for class today. They're on the Moodle page for today. I prepared those because often it's faster to just use case studies so that folks don't have to think up a case. But if you want to use a situation that you've already had at work or in another role play that you want to use, that's fine too. Excuse me. The goal is for the interviewer to feel comfortable doing an interview and to see what skills they can get into the interview. So start asking those open-ended questions, tracking what the consumer is saying, using client's language, summarizing, paraphrasing. So what would be helpful is for the person who's being interviewed, if you would just have that list of skills and just, check off how many times the interviewer used that skill. Or if you notice them doing a skill really well, just type it down for yourself or write it down for yourself so you can give them that feedback. I think we're going to start at 5 till let me do my math. I got to make sure we have enough time for everybody to have a turn and then time for us to come back together. So I'm going to say take a total of 20 minutes to do your interview. So take a few minutes to set up the interview so that the person who's doing the role playing can understand the case that they're talking about, or if you want to bring up your own, you can share it with the interviewer. Take about 20 minutes to do the interview. I'm going to try to pop into each room. And I might not be able to do that for every interview though. So take 20 minutes and I'm going to check back in 20 minutes to make sure that the first person has had that full 20 minutes to go. And then we're going to reverse roles and pick a different role play so that you have a chance to do a different kind of interview. So what I'm going to do is send you into breakout rooms, and I'm just going to put you 2 people in a room. And it's going to be random, so I don't know who you're going to be paired up with. So again, one person is the interviewer for the next 20 minutes, pick a role play to do, talk it out a little bit. The person who's being interviewed, keep track of the skills that the interviewer is using. That's all you need to do right now.
Are we getting the role plays or?
They're on the Moodle page for today's class.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
So there'll be a group of 3 or just group of 2?
It's going to be a group of 2 because of the time we have.
Okay.
And I'm going to set up my stopwatch here. Okay, so I'm going to send you all to breakout rooms and I'm going to start visiting your breakout rooms. Okay, thanks.